So the book that I've written, Italy by Way of India, Translating Art and Devotion in the Early Modern World, looks at the relationships between Italian Jesuit missionaries and Southern Indian artists during the 16th and 17th centuries. And I was really interested in the ways that an idea of India took shape in the Italian imaginary during the 16th and 17th centuries, but I was also very interested in the way that Indian indigenous artists adapted to and sort of appropriated and accommodated missionary iconographies and Christian ideas that were coming from Europe during that time. So my fieldwork for this project was in both Italy and India, which was very different for me as a trained Europeanist. To do work in South Asia was very unusual, and I think is unusual in our field, and has the potential to sort of open up the ways that we think about a global early modern period. I think this is a really important and sort of essential question right now, is how do we tell our stories of antiquity through the really through the periods of empire, through the 19th century, with an eye toward understanding the ways that Europe constructed and shaped those stories in the first place. And maybe I think restoring agency to artists from other places and other traditions who looked at the making and manufacture of the visual world in a completely different way than how Europeans understood art as a concept in the first place. So even recognizing that terms that we use in the history of the Renaissance and Baroque periods, like naturalism and idealism, and that these words are extraordinarily fraught and loaded words that mean very different things in different places. The relationship to nature itself is profoundly different across the globe. So I think that turning toward a more global early modernism is a way of opening our discipline and bringing it more astutely into the 21st century, so that it doesn't become a sort of antiquated field of the past and can more accurately connect to our future. So I think that as objects move through space and time, they accrue layers of meaning based on their new interpretive homes, their new locations. And so we can think about this in terms of very small scale ivory statuettes that are carved in southern India and then become objects for display in the context of Renaissance Florence. But we can also think about this in terms of, monumental altarpiece paintings that begin in Spanish Naples and then are sent to spend a part of their life in Spain before moving to Cleveland, Ohio, which is the subject of my second book, which was about Caravaggio. And so I think we can actually think about these methods and these ideas of mobility across so-called canonical works of art and smaller scale objects that have been more the purview of material histories as a way of thinking about the way that circulation and mobility change these sort of static, fixed interpretations of objects. There's not just one way to understand the work of art in the world. I think that it relates to current practices of collecting, because so often we see art in a museum where it's detached from its original mode of manufacture, of display. Altarpieces are no longer over altars, they're no longer consecrated, and objects are often detached from the very violent colonial histories from which they came. And I think becoming aware of those dislocations and those movements should actually be central to the way that we understand and interpret works of art in museum spaces, and in spaces where we're told what to think about a given object on display. So I hope in the future to see more of that type of approach permeating the way that curators display the objects that they show in their collections. I'm relatively new to digital humanities and digital art history, and I began Baroque Without Boundaries with a group of students right in the middle of the pandemic, when all of our cultural institutions were closed in the city and we had very little access to the types of projects and resources that I would normally assign in such a context. So I learned how to use the digital tools sort of under duress during the pandemic, and I think that what it really revealed to me, and has revealed since, we've kept the project alive, we've kept it going, subsequent students have worked on the site, is that we all really value our work more when it's meaningful to other people. And if we just publish things in, very elite journals that are only read by a few other scholars, then we're really doing a disservice to the populations that we care about. So students really loved the opportunity to write for a much broader audience and to create a digital exhibition, essentially, a digital space that they could bring their friends and family to see. A lot of students remarked that they loved that the work for the class did not live on their computers. It lived in the world, that they could, wasn't just a paper that they turned into Professor Benay. They, were writing for a broader public. So I think that these digital tools have this tremendous potential. You asked about the challenges. They're very hard to use if you are not familiar, if you don't have, I'm a humanist, I'm trained in books and writing and papers, and so we have an incredible digital scholarship center that provided the educational tools that I needed to teach me how to use those technologies. And I think that digital projects can be a little bit confusing sometimes in terms of what they're actually doing. What is it? Is this scholarship? Is this an exhibition? Is this a research tool that other students can use in the future? And so I think there are still questions that we're beginning to sort of sort through and figure out as art history uses more of the digital humanities in its work. So I think that the public humanities, and now we're starting to call them the publicly engaged humanities, the words change all the time. I think that this is an essential way for art historians who have been traditionally very much associated with two places: the academy, the university, and the fine art museum. And both of those spaces tend to have elitist associations and really be places that are kind of held in kind of closed to sanctity from the rest of the world. And I think that if art history is going to sort of survive into the future, it requires us to adapt and to become more meaningful to more people. And the way to do this, I think, is to think more creatively about how we engage with different publics, not just one unified public, but different publics, and who those people might be, and actually knowing who those people are and what they might care about or be interested in knowing, rather than assuming that we know what the right thing is to tell the public, and just providing the right answers. I think that we can work in creative dialogue with the publics that we hope to engage, to shape knowledge moving forward that's more accessible and open to everyone. I think for early career art historians, it's really important to make connections and networks outside of the academy. So we're really good at learning how to connect with other scholars, other curators, other academics, other people with PhDs like ours. But I think what's most important is to build a community of scholars and friends and professionals that work in the arts sector outside of the academy, so that we can better understand what it is that's meaningful about art history in the cities that we live in, rather than just within the university constructs that we are working within. I also think it's really important to write about the work that we do and to publish that work in scholarly formats that are digestible and understandable to more conventional scholars of art history, so that they can understand and be exposed to the kind of work that we're doing with community partner organizations. Is an exhibition called Karamu Artists, Inc., Printmaking, Race, and Community, and it's about a group of African American artists who worked in the 1930s in Cleveland, in the city, working through a graphic arts workshop to create prints that really spoke to the urban experience at the time. They were a very important group of artists during the Harlem Renaissance, and they were widely acknowledged by critics of the age and have sort of since been really sadly sort of forgotten. And their works haven't been on view since 1941. So this is a really historic exhibition and very important for the community of Cleveland to see its own history of art in a way that is not just about the white artists who lived and worked in Cleveland and the establishment of the predominantly white Cleveland Museum of Art, but rather this very important and central group of artists that worked at Caramoo House, which was a community arts and performing arts center at the time, is still one of the most important performing arts centers in the country, and really fostered the development of a Black art market in the city that still is important for artists working today in the city of Cleveland. So the exhibition is a rather conventional, typical art history, art exhibition at a major national museum, and features beautiful prints and great didactic panels and an exhibition catalog that we've published. But I think the ways that we tried to make this a more community engaged practice was by working with Caramoo House as an organization that is still existing in the city. So we've worked in constant dialogue with them. Their director, in fact, wrote the foreword for the exhibition catalog and has created an actual play, a theatrical production that will take place at the Cleveland Museum of Art rather than just being at the theater. And then we've also incorporated what we call community voice labels. So rather than all of the informational material in the exhibition coming from us as the curators, much of it comes from community members who we've interviewed about the importance of these artists, many of whom they knew or they remember their parents knowing. And so we talked to them about their experience of the art, and we have labels in the galleries with their photographs and their direct quotations that are part of the museum walls. So that communities of Black Clevelanders who have traditionally felt that the museum was not for them, was not a part of their cultural life, can feel that they see themselves and their own communities reflected in the didactic materials on the walls. So that's one way that we're trying to build a more engaged experience within the confines of the art museum.